Now, joining us to put the business case for remaining is Labour's Rachel Reeves, who shadowed both the Treasury and Work and Pensions departments during her front-bench career and is a former Bank of England economist. Welcome to the Daily Politics.
Good afternoon.
Now, the CBI commissioned PwC, the international consultants, to assess the economic impact of leaving the EU. If we remain, the economy could be 41% larger by 2030. But under one of their scenarios for leaving, we strike free trade agreements, we'd still grow by 39%. So that's 39% to 41%. The difference is hardly game-changing, is it?
Well, it's going to be pretty game-changing for people on ordinary incomes. If the economy grows more slowly than it would otherwise have done, that means less money at the end of the month to pay the rent, pay the mortgage, pay the bills. But also look at what's going to happen in the near term. Look what's happening already before we even had a vote. And that is that sterling has fallen, that stock markets have fallen, that money is leaving the UK, business investment decisions are being postponed. Now, what does that mean for ordinary people? Well, we know what recessions mean for ordinary people because we saw it back in 2008. It means wages falling or stagnating, it means people losing their homes, and it means people losing their jobs. And it is people on modest and middle incomes who always pay the highest price when economies falter and when economies go into recession. And so if we make that decision in 9 days' time, people should be under no illusions about what it means for the cost of living and jobs and growth.
Why should we risk even a slight shrinking in economic growth, even if it is for the short term, as the Vote Leave campaign is saying? Why should people be worried about the future for their jobs, even in the short term? And if these scenarios are played out, there would be a shrinking. And you said at the beginning, you agree there would be some sort of shock.
I see a perception causing a short-term problem. I don't see a recession, by the way. I just see a stalling. Sterling, by the way, has risen since March, so please don't start the alarmists about falling currency.
Well, would it be
no, but you said sterling. You said the pound.
Is it a two-month
Rachel, you said the pound.
Yes, I said sterling. I said stock markets.
But it actually hasn't.
Well, it's at a two-month low.
No, it hasn't. Well, so why did you say it has?
The sterling is at a two-month low, Digby. I presume you agree with me on that.
It's higher today than it was in March.
Right, but hang on. It's higher today than it was in March,
yes.
But what happened before March?
Well, it's been fluctuating. In fact, it's been fluctuating a lot lately.
Right.
All I don't want, I want to deal in facts.
Downwards,
I want to deal in facts, which is politicians come on here and say, and the pound's been falling. It hasn't.
But to answer your specific
question, this is about the global competitiveness of our nation in Asia's century. And we at the moment are hitched to an organisation that worked a treat between 1957 and 1990 and has failed 520 million people ever since. And if we carry on like this, we are not going to be able to afford pensions and healthcare and welfare in 20 years' time. Well, so if somebody's going to say, well, for a couple of years, it's going to be not Armageddon and not recession, but difficult, but the reward is in 20 years' time you're globally competitive. It is very irresponsible of a politician.
What about that reward? Would there be a reward after 2 years? Let's just say, for this discussion, that there would be that short-term shock. Sterling could perhaps fall. We don't know, of course. And there might be some sort of downward pressure. If then the economy was liberated, would that be something you could support?
Well, look at what the Governor of the Bank of England has said, Mark Carney. He said that Brexit is the biggest domestic risk to our financial stability. There will be a short-run cost of leaving the EU, but of course there will be a long-run cost as well, because we will no longer have access to the single market of 500 million people. Well, wait a second. Brexit campaigners like Michael Gove and Boris Johnson say that we will not be part of the single market.
But that doesn't mean we wouldn't have access to it.
Rachel, can I just...
Well, if we're not part of the single market, you're either you're either part of the single market or you're not.
But you can negotiate access to it.
You could access. You can of course you can still trade. But whether you have access in terms of tariff-free trade, the Brexiteers are saying they don't want
the single market. If the single market means what it really means in terms of wealth creation is it's zero tariff.
No, it means much more than that, Digby. On the services side,
oh well,
as you well know, it means
75% of our economy is services, and the Services Directive isn't implemented
Digby.
in France, let alone anywhere else.
How high are
for
tariffs
example,
now?
The Services Directive doesn't work, Rachel.
Don't talk over each other. Go on,
It doesn't
Rachel.
work.
In my constituency in Leeds, financial services is a huge part of our economy. Under the single market, there's passporting rules, which means that companies who are registered here have access to be able to trade
But it
across the
doesn't
whole
work.
European Union. And that's in banking, in
But it
insurance, and a
doesn't
whole
work.
range of
Right.
industries.
Well, explain the fact that it doesn't work.
Right, I'm on the board of one of my companies is a invoice discounter in London. We're trying to open in France. We've had French regulators say we don't want British companies to do this, and I've said, but there's a services directive that's single market. I hear Labour politicians tell me there's a single market, so I can make you. And they've said, well, of course you can make me. Take me to a court of justice. I said, I can't afford it. He said, exactly, it's not going to happen.
Right. Again, you don't know, do you?
But,
I
of
mean,
course we don't,
no.
neither do they.
Right.
But the single market is about zero tariff. At the moment,
it's about much more than that.
At the
Digby.
moment, it is
In
zero.
What would the tariffs be? I mean, how high would they be in the moment?
No
Even where
one
there
is
are
going to
tariffs,
put
they're
them up from
pretty
zero,
low, aren't
Rachel.
they?
Well,
No one's going to put them up from zero.
The World Trade Organisation have said that it would be the worst possible
Would be what
outcome
level?
would be for us to leave the single market.
but
Which is
what
what
did
the
they say the
Brexiteers
tariff
are
levels
saying.
would
Well,
be?
it'd be different in different industries. But for example, in car manufacturing, I think they're between about 10 and 15.
So Germany sell 1 million cars a year to Britain. It's our highest profit margin in the world is the British auto market. Do you really think that Audi, Volkswagen, Mercedes and BMW are going to allow Brussels to put a tariff of 10 to 15% on every car they sell in Britain? I don't think so.
Well, the point is, Digby, you've absolutely no idea
but neither
what
of
happens.
you. And you sit here with this
Digby,
alarmist stuff.
Digby, you're a typical middle-aged bloke who loves interrupting women. You just don't know how to conduct yourself.
Right.
Let
Answer
me
the question.
answer the question that Joe...
Please answer the question and don't just come out with all the stuff you normally do.
Well, there you go again, Digby.
Oh,
Well,
please.
answer, but Rachel,
Over
answer
again.
the specific answer the specific question on tariffs, because it is important. You don't know that they would be put up to that level either.
Well, the Brexiteers, like Gove and Johnson, say they want to leave the single market, and that means that we go on to WTO tariffs. Now, there's not a single example of a trade negotiation being done with the EU within 2 years. And of course, as soon as we leave the European Union, the Prime Minister says that he will invoke Article 50, which means within 2 years we'll leave the European Union. And after that period, we will be out of the single market and we'll be on WTO tariffs.
But we won't, because we're negotiated.
Right.
And there's
Because
no
the
example.
German auto industry will never allow...
And there's no example of a...
Well, Rachel,
country-
let Digby
I'm letting you speak,
let
as you
Digby
asked to.
finish.
Go on.
No, go on. You finish that thought.
Very kind of you. At the end of the day, the German motor industry is such an enormous lobbyist in Brussels. It will never allow its auto industry not to sell into here on zero tariff. And the deal will be zero tariff the other way. What is equally important for economic growth in either remain or leave is that at the moment I have a lot of businesses where I want to get visas for Indians to come with engineering skills and work in my country. I can't, because you have a government, and by the way, a Labour government will be doing just the same. They're saying we're not going to give visas outside because we can't stop the ones coming inside. I couldn't care if they're Romanian engineers. This is not about the location of where they come from, it's the skill they've got. And if you want global competitiveness inside or outside, on a business footing, you've got to allow us to fish in an immigration pool of 100% of the world,
Right.
and not just 28
Well, on the
countries.
basis of immigration...
It's an
one of
economic
the,
issue, not an immigration issue.
One of the things, though, that is raised, and was raised, in fact, by Tristram Hunt in the discussion that you had with him on similar ground, was about the fact that you wouldn't be able to get a deal with the EU unless you accepted free movement of labour.
Well,
Do you think that's true?
Yes, and that is
Why?
that is what, for example, Wolfgang Schäuble, the finance
But they
minister
would
in
say that,
Germany,
wouldn't they?
other countries have said. Digby says he wants to deal in facts. The fact is that no country has done a free trade agreement with the EU within 2 years. Canada has taken more than 7 years
not
to
Canada.
do its deal, and you would need the agreement of all 27 other member states of the European Union to do any deal on access to their
Wouldn't that be a
markets.
terrible
And there's no
disappointment
evidence that
for
would happen.
Leave supporters if the country votes to leave the EU, a deal is done, for some sort of access, a good deal on the single market, but the quid pro quo has to be some sort of freedom of movement.
And if there's a degree of freedom of movement based on skill, what's wrong with that?
Right. So you would sign up. Freedom of movement within the EU. You would sign up to that.
I tell you, if what was coming into Britain on offer from inside or outside the EU was quality immigration, and a lot of it, and it was based on skill, I would put my hand up for that, because it helps creating wealth to pay for schools and hospitals in Britain. What really does frustrate me is I have people in Brussels telling me that I can't fish in a pool of 100% of available labour, and that diminishes my ability to be competitive, and in 25 years' time we will be doing stuff elsewhere and not Britain, and you won't be able to afford to spend the money you normally spend on your schools and hospitals.
Well, what do you say to that?
Well, I've got 2 young children. I'm in my 30s. In 25 years' time, I want my children to be able to go and live and work anywhere within the European Union. I want there to be good jobs and investment in this country, and I want to have first-rate public services.
But at the moment,
if our economy shrinks...
but if you look at countries like Spain and Italy, for example, and Greece, they all want to come here, the young people, because there are no jobs for them there at the moment. That's the reality for now, isn't it?
There are huge problems. There are huge problems in the European Union at the moment, and I'm not saying that everything is fine. I think that this referendum is a wake-up call to the European Union and to the British government that things have to be done differently on freedom of movement, on jobs, on the whole approach to austerity. We need to have reform, but if we walk away, we don't know what we are unleashing. The European Union, if we leave in 9 days' time, could very easily fragment and break up, and we'll go back to the same situation that we saw in the 30s and 40s, and all the instability there.
If your plea that I don't interrupt you is valid, so is my request on behalf of the viewers that you answer the question. And the question was, why isn't business allowed to fish in a reservoir of 100% of available talent in the world? And why am I being told I can only get visas for people who live in the European Union?
Well,
or rather, they don't need a visa.
If you look at the numbers,
no, just answer the question.
Yes, if you look at the numbers for net migration, there was more migration to this country from outside of the European Union.
The point is, I can't get visas on a universal basis.
Well, would you want fewer people, though, to come overall? Because that's what a lot of Leave support...
Yeah, I know, but I wouldn't.
Right,
I would have,
so the numbers for you would...
For me, this isn't a numbers game. For me, this is a skill, ability to create wealth, generate tax, and pay for schools and hospitals. And you are inhibiting businesses' ability to create wealth by allowing anybody to come in from Europe and not skilled people to come in from overseas.
Digby, I'm not a Tory government minister, and of course they're the ones who implemented...
Your government did just the same. Your government did just the same.
Digby, you were part of that government and not
But don't blame the Tories or Labour. This is not a tribal issue.
Right. It is the Tories who introduced the cap on numbers and have tried to squeeze out the number of non-EU migrants coming into the country. I think we need reform of free movement of labour. I don't think it's working.
While we've moved on to the territory of party politics, stay with us, Rachel, because in the last half an hour